Hello, everyone. I am Patrice Francois. I am the co-founder and festival director of Imagine This Women's International Film Festival. And I would like to welcome everyone to our panel, Story Redefined, Telling Authentic BIPOC Stories, BIPOC, sorry, excuse me. Let's get right into it. A great story not only entertains us, but it empowers us, and sometimes it can educate us. A well-written story helps us to understand the experiences of people who we might never get a chance to meet. And I'd like to introduce our panel: executive producer, writer, and director Amy, actress and director Lynn, writer and executive producer Dayna, director Oge, and director and producer Shirley. Welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And I just want to ask, how is everyone doing? I know we're going through a lot during these crazy times, and we're all trying to stay creative and active. And so I just want to know how you guys are doing.
That's a loaded question. I mean, in all transparency, vulnerability, and openness, I'm hanging on by a thread. But I'm blessed and I'm grateful and I'm present and I'm here.
Same here.
Yeah, I feel that. It's Dayna, by the way, and hi, everybody.
I'm sorry, Dayna.
No worries. It's good to be with you all. Yeah, I feel that. I was going to say, too, I've been really practicing staying in the present moment and being with all the things that I'm feeling, whatever that is, and letting all of that and like letting it be, but also trying to notice there are still moments of beauty and light and joy, as fleeting as they may be. I'm practicing. Also self-care, as my therapist likes to say, practice, it's all a practice. So I am practicing, continuing to notice those as well, because it's a lot going on, but I'm working on that.
Okay. So I just want to ask you guys, like, with everything that's been going on, how do we, like, amid all the protests, we've all been trying to get Hollywood to focus more on telling our stories, focusing on change, hiring more POCs, you know, at the executive level so that we can see more change, so we can tell more stories. How do we keep the momentum going after the Black Lives Movement dies down? How do we keep the pressure on the executives to tell our stories, to continue with the change of hiring more? And this is open to anyone.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is keeping our foot on the gas. This is I've been hearing this phrase, this term a lot. It's not a moment, it's a movement, right? And it's up to us to, which I mean, it's like the gift and the curse, because at times it's very exhausting. And right now, I think there's an energy of people just being overall tired, right? But we do have a responsibility to our culture, to society, to the world, to keep our foot on the gas, to keep our foots on their necks, to apply pressure, and know and understand the notion that it's not a moment, it is a movement. And with that, looking long term, and continuing to do the work that we are doing and enrolling others to come along for the ride.
I've also been working myself to try and be honest with the what the emotional stress of this time is with people I work with. And by that, I mean, they want our stories, right? But having access to our art also means having access to our pain. And we're in pain right now. Like, Shirley, everything you're saying, like, you're one of those women who, like, literally on your sickest day, you look great because I'm looking at you and you look amazing. And I'm like, she must be holding it together better than me. But you're probably like me. When I'm sick, I do my makeup really well. So I don't look sick. But, like, literally, I feel like we're all wearing masks in a sense right now. We're all trying to present as fine. And there's this hard push and pull, right? Because they're finally paying attention to us. But for like the entire month of June, I was in too much grief to produce work. And I just started being open about that. And I'm not gonna send my exec like a long ass email being like, I'm broken inside. But I was like, you know, this month has been very stressful for reasons that I'm sure you understand. So, and so I've just tried to be open with that, because if you want my art, you have to get all of me in some sense. And that includes me being honest with myself, because I think there's so much truth in us putting keeping our foots on the gas. But I also think we have to leave space for us to heal, because this is such a hard time. And talking of therapist comments, my therapist, I'm like, they're listening to us now. And she's like, well, who says they're gonna stop listening? And I'm like, well, history shows they will. But she's like, but isn't that feeling what's driving you crazy right now? So maybe release that feeling. And I'm like, oh, I do have to let go of the stress of thinking that they might not be listening tomorrow, and give myself the space to heal so that I can create the best art, so that even when they are listening, they're hearing the best of me, if that makes sense.
No, but totally.
I kind of look at it too, like from the eyes of like how systematically Hollywood plays into this idea of these social constructs that keep us oppressive, right? And so I think that for me, it's really challenging this notion of how Hollywood actually views racial and social justice, because I think that when you only view it through the lens of diversity, to me, that becomes tokenism, right? Because then all you're doing is integrating people of color into a system that's meant to oppress us and keep us down and keep us marginalized. When you look at the history of television or the history of Hollywood, right? It typically tells the stories of white America, right? And very few, like you see the sprinkles of our stories where we feel like we can relate to what's being told. And so for me, it's like really challenging this idea of how Hollywood understands racial and social justice, and taking it from the lens of diversity, but understanding that like what we're coming up against as people of color in Hollywood and all these other systems are ideologies, right? So how do we dismantle these belief systems that's governing us at the moment, right? Because it doesn't matter if we continue to tell them these stories in the moment that they're listening, because as you said, I think as Amy said, history shows that they'll listen, but then they'll stop. And I think the reason why that happens is because the belief system hasn't been challenged, right? And so it's really about how do we collectively hold them accountable, but also know that like that's not our work to do, right? Like at the end of the day, like I think we all have work to do. And as Amy said, for Black folks and people of color and the most marginalized, it's that work of educating ourselves, empowering ourselves, and healing. But then when it comes to these systems of oppression, are white folks, right? The work is completely different, right? It's them holding themselves accountable and figuring out how they can do better and how they can change, and not relying on us to give them those answers.
Yeah, to build on that, one of the things that excites me right now, that it gives me hope, exciting is overstating it. One of the things that gives me some hope is that we are building our own tables versus continuing to fight and claw and beg for a seat at their table. So, you know, the Isas are building our tables, the Ava's building a table, Lena's building a table, Charles King's building it. There's so more than I can name, right? There are people we're building our own ability and continuing to like create this foundation of our ability to tell stories, whether we feel like they are paying attention or not. We're less dependent on that than we used to be, right? Then it feels, at least that's what I'm telling myself, but it does to me genuinely feel that way. And so what's exciting to me is as we continue to actually have more of a financial stake in the game, in small, you know, again, it's building, right? Like there still aren't enough of us greenlighting at studios. We know all those things, but as we continue to build a little bit more of a financial stake in the game and have the ability to tell our stories no matter what, I think that also is contributing to a slow turn of this seismic thing that needs to be shifted.
Yeah, I think that right now I'm hearing a lot from the people in charge, that they're listening and that they want to hear what we have to say. And I am doing a lot of practicing of holding them to that. And right now, because things are not at, you know, we're not fully revved because things aren't completely back to normal. I mean, they're not even close to being back to normal, there's this like feeling of like organizing my sock drawer, my, you know, sort of like putting everything in its place, because we know once things are back in flow, we need to know where things are. So right now, I have been actively trying to talk to other people about how we're going to solve these problems when they occur, because they are going to occur inevitably. And how do we strengthen ourselves so that right now where we're at isn't just like a moment, you know? Right now isn't just like, I know where the socks are. I'm gonna stop talking about the socks, but like, I like this feeling of like, yeah, everything's perfect right now because I have time to focus on it. I'm going to therapy, all of this, but when it's go time, we need to still have those things in place. And so right now, I think it's really, really important that we're all on the same page of the people who we're working with, that when we say something, we mean it, and we're gonna hold you to that. And when the time comes, we can still hold you to that because we've had this discussion, remember? And so that I feel like is happening a lot right now.
So how would you guys all use your unique power? Because you guys all have power. You all have a platform that you've been able to, like, how can you use your platform, the power that you have right now, to hold these executives to the fire? Like, how do you put the pressure on? How do you continue to tell your stories?
I like to think of it, I explain my no. And by that, I mean, when I pass on a project, it's usually passing to white agents or white execs or sometimes white producers who need a Black voice. And I explain why I'm saying no, to force them to realize what they've asked me to write. And so, for instance, like, there's so much stuff like in Hollywood that's been in development for so long, and now that people are listening to Black writers, they're like, let's just slap a Black writer on it to validate it. This white guy came up with it, but let's slap a Black voice on it. And it's sort of like, oh, so you're saying that you want me to write a project where all of the Black people are poor and the one white person is there to save them? That would be a white savior story. That's why I can't do this. And they're like, oh, and they don't realize, like, very often they don't realize they're doing it. And I think some ways of retraining them for me has actually been just to explain my no's and explain my yeses, so that they start to learn what I as a Black creative find exciting and what I as a Black creative don't. And since I'm their only link to the culture, very often they think, well, if she doesn't like it, then maybe the audience that we want her to be writing for won't like it either. That's been one way that I've been dealing with that.
I like how you pose the question of how do we use our power. I think that every human being has a uniqueness and a power, and being aware of what that is, it gives you a greater opportunity to be able to utilize it, right? So me as like a leading producer and a director, I love that I'm able to have a huge say in who's on my team, you know, so pushing my line producers, pushing the production management to bring me diverse talent. If you're not looking hard enough, look harder, right? They're out there, they're present, and being able to provide them with resources, because there's so many communities. I literally told a friend today, she sent me a new listserv of Black and brown talent, and I was like, girl, you're gonna have to keep reminding me, because there's just so many of these resources out there, right? They're so abundant, right? And being able to let my peers and my colleagues know that they exist, and pushing them into those spaces so that they can get connected and they can do the work, because I know it's more than possible. People just need to do it, right? And also, speaking of communities, being tapped into the communities and volunteering and being a leader within those communities. I support and head up this community called Who You Know, which is, we have over 12,000 people of color professionals in media and entertainment within the community. And now we're in an opportunity where we're sitting at tables with Hulu and Netflix and Sony, and I mean every week, and we're able to connect the community and the people with these executives and with these heads. So when I'm in these rooms and when I'm in these spaces, and it's not always easy. Sometimes it's horrifying. Sometimes I'm exhausted. Sometimes I'm just having a bad day, right? Like whatever. But like being able to be courageous and be bold and speak up and call a spade, let people know what is working, what's not working, what the needs are, and how we can make a more inclusive and diverse Hollywood, whatever that looks like.
The thing that was coming to me right now is I've been challenging myself to, the phrase about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Even for myself, the conversations that I'm having with execs about either, what's behind the note you're giving me. If you're saying you want to bring someone of color into this scenario, what are you doing to really make that happen? I'm just noticing for myself, I had to be honest about, is there a part of me that was afraid of whatever, not being liked, never getting called by so-and-so again, being ostracized, being on somebody else's, and so putting all of that aside and speaking about like, this is why what you just said this is why that was problematic. I understand you may not realize, but getting into those kind of conversations and calling people in ways that, because I believe, to Amy's point, most people, there's a lot of privilege ignorance, right? And so a lot of that kind of not realizing what you may be doing and maybe having some good intentions. So being willing to have difficult conversations, whether it's around a project, around how you're going about looking for people for a project, all of that. I feel like there's no more important time right now to be an artist. Like I was talking to a friend who was exhausted, understandably, and just having that like, one of those like, what's it all for kind of moments, like, what are we doing? And is this matter? And I feel like there's a lot right now. Like for me, it's a time that we are needed, but it's also a time for me to step out of my comfort zone if I'm expecting other people to step out of theirs. So just doing more calling in versus calling out, but still calling people on stuff.
Amy, can you talk about Insecure's writer room? Because it seems like you guys cracked the code. You guys are effortlessly telling the stories of Black people. You've captured the Black experience. Do you think it has to do with the makeup of the writer's room, or is it about the producers? Like, how does this get told in the way that it's told?
I'll say just, really simply, it's thanks to Issa. Issa had a vision for this show and really wanted to make a room that felt like a family. I think coming from the web and coming from Awkward Black Girl, which was a show she created with her friends, you have this camaraderie, this feeling of like, we're all in it together. We're all on the same side of telling this story. And I've always heard showrunners say that no asshole policy, but I do feel like on our show, it wasn't just like there are no assholes. It's also like people who are who know who they are as writers and who are used to sharing themselves. And I think because our boss is like that, it makes us all feel welcome doing that. It's so interesting because even though our room is predominantly Black, I would say in so many ways, it's still the most diverse room I've ever worked in because we have queer representation, we have white people, we have people from different economic backgrounds. It's like, we don't all agree on one thing because so many of us are Black. And even as you say, you've captured the Black experience. I think Issa herself has said several times that this is a Black experience. We're not a monolith. So it's like, this is one Black experience. This is a Black girl's, it's a retelling of a version of her younger self. But there are lots of people who might not identify or who might see it as more escapist and less real. And I think that's okay. I think sometimes we get in trouble when we try and create like 4-quadrant shows. It's got to relate to parents, kids, the youth, the elderly. It's like, how do you do that in one show? I think in the last few years, we've seen a rise of like, the more specific your story can be, actually, the more appealing it can be, because people get to find themselves in there. And I think that's what makes our room so special, is everyone has so many different experiences. And then also Prentice, our showrunner, is someone who just, there aren't really levels in our room. Like, obviously, you know, people's levels, how long people have been working, but everyone's voice is equal. There's not, a story doesn't win because I pitched it, you know. It's sort of like the best story wins. And even if the best story comes from the highest person, the lowest ranked person can still challenge it. There's no ego. And I think that is just like a beautiful, special thing that I've heard, again, like I've heard showrunners say they want that, but it actually happens in our room. And it's really, really special. It's truly the best room I've ever been in. And I think it's those elements that come together, but it's all top down. It's always top down. It's like, whenever you're looking for a job, ask if your boss likes their spouse and if they want to see their kids, because if they don't, you're going to be working long hours. And it's that same thing. It's like, oh, she's really tight with her friends from high school. Oh, Issa believes in strong relationships. Great. You know, it's that same thing. It's always top down. So that's what I think makes it special, is we have a special boss.
Dayna, right?
Yes.
Yes. So you've had the privilege of working, you know, being part of the whole Insecure team. Can you share your experience?
I mean, I co-sign every single word that my dear Amy said. I mean, truly, you know, it's also the best room I've ever been in. And it does start from the top, and the vision that Issa had. It starts with who Issa is as a person, as Amy's saying, right? Just the way she knows herself, her level of talent and genius, and then the intention that she put into who she brought together. The only thing I can really add is, for me, the thing that I realized after being there 3 seasons, and then, you know, like having this sort of struggle of am I gonna move on? Okay, I'm moving on, but I'm never really leaving. After going through all of that, I realized how transformed I had personally been by, when you walk into a job every day and you have all these badass, amazing Black women, like, you're so cute, that was funny. Oh, that dress is fly. I like your hair. Literally, like, you know, every day. Like, I realized how much I felt like I went through a revolving door and came out as like Black Wonder Woman in a way that I was not, that it took, you know what I mean? That it took looking back to really fully, I appreciated it when I was there, but looking back to really go, wow, that was not only the best room I've ever been in, but it was a transformational experience. And that's not an exaggeration.
Now, you also offer courses, correct? Like,
yes.
Yes. And
online,
the whole premise is telling writers, like, teaching writers how to hone and find their own authentic voice. How do you, like, what inspired you to start this course, and how does one find their authentic voice?
Well, hopefully the intention of the class is actually teaching anyone, offering some bits of inspiration and wisdom to anyone who wants to pursue something creative. So whether or not you consider yourself a professional writer, whether you want to start a podcast, write a play, you know, whatever the thing may be. For me, the goal is, it took me, you know, a while to really feel confident, I would say. I had been working for some years as a professional writer, I would say, before I felt really confident in what my voice was. And so it's really about like recognizing that that's something that matters. I think it can be easy to sort of chase the same way that the industry chases, right? What was the last hot thing? What was the last big thing? And recognizing that, like, I believe that we all are storytellers if that's what we choose to do. We all have a really powerful story in our lives and what we have survived in our own personal stuff, in our joys, in our tragedies. And so recognizing, for me, it just starts with recognizing the power of your voice. And that's as much inner work. I'm going to try not to get too woo-woo, but you know what I mean? That's as much inner work as it is about writing. So for me, it's like, there are so many places you can go to learn about 3-act structure and all of that. But I wanted to speak to, you need all, you know, if you want to write a screenplay, you need that, but you also need to have a sense of who you are and what do you want to say and what matters to you, you know? So that's what I wanted to speak to. So there's things, you know, having to do with like life maps and really looking back at like what have been moments in your life that have shaped you. And not that you have to write about them, but being aware of them, you know?
Right.
So again, that's why it's as much about really doing some inner soul work, kind of homework, as it is mastering the art of the teaser, you know?
No, that's great. Love it. I want to know, what are some ways non-POC writers, okay, let me rephrase this. What should non-POC writers know about telling POC stories? And this is open to everyone. Oh, okay.
Let the POCs tell the story.
Yeah, I was like, don't do it.
That is the only
Let the POCs tell the story.
Okay. All right. And why do you say that? Why do you say that? What's the reason behind that?
I say that because I've been performing since I was 5 years old. I'm in my mid 40s now, so a very long time. And I have spent almost my entire life saying the words of white men, how they imagine an Asian woman, an Asian girl, you know, when I was growing up, how she speaks. And it never felt like something I would say. And it's not until, you know, I just finished directing my first feature that I also wrote. And part of the reason it happened was because it is the third movie in a trilogy that I had been in. And the writer-director was a white man. And the story revolved around a man, the first two movies. And so when I told the third story and finished the trilogy, I told it from the perspective of the three women from the first two movies, all Asian American. And he knew he couldn't tell the story of three Asian American women. Like, he just couldn't do that. And rightly so. He helped me, even though this had been his baby that he came up with. He knew that it was time to pass on the torch. And to his credit, to Dave Boyle's credit, he completely mentored and shepherded me in that vision, but knew it had to be mine. Even if he was like, I created those characters, I don't think they would do that. He just had to trust that as an Asian American woman, I knew what these people were going to say. Yeah, and he just trusted that. And sure enough, he wouldn't have been able to tell the story that way. So that's why I say that so fervently, just because I feel like it's been decades of it, and I'm sick of it.
Yeah, and on that, I mean, like, that isn't that the magic thing that a POC writer can do, or a non-POC writer can do, is trust. Like, literally, I'm in this to be immortal, right? Like, writers are immortal. We still talk about Shakespeare. We still talk about Dr. Seuss. Like, this shit is immortal. It's the only way that you last forever is by creating art or creating Pythagorean's theorem, which I cannot do. So I'm over here, like, if you're trying to be immortal, that means people speaking about you, saying the things you said, mentoring other people. So the white writers who shut themselves off from accepting people of color into their spaces, I'm like, oh, okay, so you ain't in for the long haul. And that's to their own detriment. Go ahead and die with your multicam. Like, I like to live forever. So I love the writers who are going to trust. I love the ones who say, I did it wrong. I want to help you get it right. I know the tools, you have the voice, but I don't love it the other way when it's like, come and authenticate what I wrote. Like, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't show trust. Trust is in saying, you can do it better. I'm going to give you the money. I'm going to introduce you to the right people. I'm going to mentor you in the style of how we do this, but it's your story. You're the EP, you're creating it. That's trust. And I think the director you're talking about who did that for you, Lynn, like, it's scary to do that because it goes against that Darwinian instinct where it's like, but if she's eating my pie, then I starve and I die. And it's like, no, but success isn't pie. We can all have a slice. So him being able to do that makes, in my mind, he sounds like a good non-POC person. And we need more of that. We need more trust from people who aren't of color, because the fact of the matter is we've been walking in their worlds for years. We've had to survive. We know how to write them. They don't know how to write us. literally, they don't know how to speak the empathy that we have in volumes. So if they don't learn how to trust us, their stories will always die on the vine. I just truly believe that. And so I think it's important for people who actually are in it for the long haul to let go of their egos a little bit and trust that we know how to tell our stories.
And this is a great segue, because Oge, someone trusted you to tell your story, to tell the story of your documentary, which was Invisible Portrait. And you were telling a story, you created a narrative that didn't exist, and this white man, cis man, I'm assuming, trusted you to tell this story. Can you tell us a little bit about the story behind Invisible Portraits and getting that story out?
Yeah, I had just moved back from London because I was working at Rain Dog Films and I was producing partners with the actor Colin Firth and this guy named Jet Doherty. And there was an unfortunate experience that happened between all of us, and I decided to leave the company. And I came back to LA and I was just completely like in disarray. Like I was just like, what the hell? Like, what am I gonna do next? Like really, really having a hard time. Like I went through about like 2 months of like severe depression that I was experiencing. And a woman that I had met at this charity event, like randomly, like 3 months before, texted me and was like, I'm at lunch with this guy. He has this idea. I don't know why I randomly thought of you, but you know, would you be willing to meet him? And initially I was like, I don't know. And then I ended up saying yes. And so then I ended up meeting this guy at the Peninsula the following day. And I go into this meeting and it's this middle-aged white guy sitting at the table. And I sit down and, you know, we do the formals. And then he goes, I want to create a documentary or a film that celebrates Black mothers. And I was like, what? Why? Like, I was just really confused on why he wanted to do that. And, you know, he was like, I saw this clip of Isaiah Thomas being inducted into the Hall of Fame, and, you know, he's bawling, crying, and his mother's in the audience, and he's talking about the sacrifices that his mother made for him. And I just feel that Black mothers aren't celebrated. And I was like, okay, well, if I'm gonna create anything, I wouldn't create a documentary celebrating Black mothers. I would want to create a documentary that holds reverence for Black women and Black girls, because we're that before we're mothers. And he was like, okay, if you can pitch me an idea and I love it, I'll fully fund it. And at the time, like I had only done producing work, like I hadn't directed before at all. And so I'm still thinking he wants me to produce and like to find a team together to direct it and like, you know, pull a whole production crew together. And so I go away for like a week and I come back and I pitch him this idea of how I think the documentary should go. And then he looks at me and he goes, well, you tell the story. And I was like, wait, what? And then he was like, you should direct it. Like, if this is your vision, like I fully believe in it and I fully fund it. And so he pulled out a blank check and was like, how much do you need to get started? And even then, initially, it still didn't feel real. Like it felt very like, okay, this check is gonna bounce, like something ain't right about it. Because typically that's not how it goes in this industry, right? And so it took a lot of conversations and a lot of prayer and meditation with my friends. And, you know, then because I initially said no to the offer. Even then I was like, I can't direct it. I've never done it before. And then I had a friend tell me, you know, like, what do you mean no? You know how many white men in this town, like, you know, like say yes to an opportunity to direct for the first time.
That part.
Has no clue how to do it, but they do it anyway. So you're going to tell the story, you know, like you have a full community behind you to support you, like you can do this. And so then I went back a few days later and told him, yeah, I was like, okay, I'll direct it. And then I just went into 9 months of just deep research and just studying, you know, the history of Black women and realizing really like the things that we're taught is really revisionist history. So much of it is left out. And so even in the midst of like the research where it was so many days that, you know, it was six days a week, 14-hour days. And the days that I would rest, which was Sunday, like I couldn't get out of bed before 4. Like I was carrying so much trauma from what I was reading and so much emotional pain that I had to put myself back into therapy because I had stopped for a while. But I knew that like I had a duty to create some kind of vessel or platform to tell these women's stories. And so I allowed it to fuel me and created Invisible Portraits.
I think this is what people need to, like, we need allyship, right? We need people who are willing to support us and help us tell our stories. And that's wonderful. I love hearing cis white men, you know, believing in us to tell us our stories, because I'm always wondering, how can we continue to push our stories forward? How can we push stories of Asian, Latina, and Black stories? And it just seems like Hollywood is always, you know, trying to, you know, they always tell us, you know, we can't get it done, that no one, it's not going to succeed. We're not going to make any money. We can't sell it to Asia. We can't sell it here. And yet every time we put something forward, it succeeds. There's a need for it. And you can feel that there's a need for it because we want it and people watch it, and we always kill it in the box office. Why do you think Hollywood is so resistant into telling our stories? Like, what is it that we can do to get there, to tell more stories?
I mean, I think why they're resistant is because when you think about who are the gatekeepers and the people making the decisions, right? It's white old men, right? And so at the end of the day, they can't relate to these stories because like they don't have that experience, right? When you think about the way that patriarchy and white supremacy work, it's really about looking at experiencing life through the gazes of white men, right? And so when it's stories that are presented that aren't through that gaze and that doesn't center them, they don't know what to do with it, which is why I think it's so incredibly powerful and empowering and important when you have the Isas and the Charles Kings and the Avas challenging that and saying like, I don't need your approval. I'm going to find other ways to tell these stories, and I'm going to prove to you that these stories matter and that these stories are important. Like when we were trying to figure out distribution for Invisible Portraits, I came across the same thing, right? Like I applied to these different festivals and these studios, and they all were telling me the same thing. Like these festivals were like, this is an incredible documentary, but we don't know how to market it, so we can't allow it into the festival. And our studios being like, we don't really know how to market this. Like, it's not, I don't know. But then the moment the pandemic happened and they were forced to, thrust into what's going on, and the moment that the murder of Ahmaud Arbery happened and Breonna Taylor and like, George Floyd, all of a sudden they all come back literally. And they're like, oh, wait, do you still have that project you're working on? And you're just like, absolutely not. Like, no, like, because at the moment you didn't understand how to do it. So I'm going to show you how to do it. Like, I'm going to show you why these stories are important. I'm going to show you how to market these. And then, because at the end of the day, Hollywood follows culture, right? Like it doesn't create it. And I think the people who are creating tables and creating new outlets know that.
Shirley, you produce docuseries for Refinery29 that generate millions of views. Why do you think these stories resonate so well with the audience? Do you think it has to do with the way the stories are told through like a human, like authentic human storytelling? Can you just share a little bit of how that process is?
Yeah, well, Refinery's audience, majority is women. Women founded Refinery. The Refinery brand literally lays on the shoulder of women. I think that our audience is so attracted to our content and our style of storytelling because we just speak to women's issues and to women's interests and what women care about, right? Like it's kind of parallel to what has been coming up a lot in this conversation, right? Like we can all relate to each other. Like we tell the stories that women go through, right? So they come to us because they're looking for relatable content. They're looking for answers. They're looking for hope. They're seeking information. But I think that that's one of the reasons why Refinery is so successful in the type of storytelling that we tell. It's authentic, it's raw, and it really speaks to the heart and the interests of women.
Thank you. Let's see. I want to know, like, we've talked about stereotypes and we've talked about authentic storytelling, but how do we hold writers, creators, producers, directors accountable? How do we tell them, like, you guys have your power, I'm not at the place where I have the power, not yet, to tell, a director, I don't think we're going in the right direction. I feel like it's laced with stereotypes. How do we hold every creator accountable for telling POC stories? Because unfortunately, there are non-POC writers and directors out there telling our stories. How do we hold them accountable?
I can speak to some personal experiences being on set and feeling like, as an actor, that the script was a bit stereotypical. And it's not until like you hear Video Village like laughing at something that you're like, oh, that wasn't supposed to be funny. This could be problematic. And having other people of color there on set with you to sort of have your back is so important. I don't know if it had just been me, because I feel like almost every actor feels this way, unless they're like number one on the call sheet. Like, who am I to like go up to the people in Video Village and be like, excuse me, I know you've worked really hard on this, but this is sort of a problem. But strength in numbers, when you have other people. And if you don't have another person of color there, at least to have like a white ally, somebody who you can bounce that idea off of and present it together. That's something that I actually have seen happen personally a number of times. And right away, like, they realize, oh, so sorry, like, didn't even know that that was offensive. Of course, Joe Schmo was just like writing this in his bedroom at night last night with rewrites. We will take care of this. But it's not until you speak up, and that speaking up is a muscle that you have to develop. It's really difficult, I think, when you feel like you don't have power. And that is just important for us all to know, that we do have power. We do have a voice. And no matter, even if the structure, because Hollywood and making movies and TV shows is such a structure, to know how to work within that structure without fear of being blacklisted, without fear of of ruining a relationship, how to talk to people about these things without burning bridges is really important.
Yeah, someone brought up belief systems earlier, and I think some of these trash gatekeepers, right? Like their belief systems definitely need to be challenged. And like when people, because I've been in situations and I've heard other people, other stories and circumstances where someone will come to an EP or whoever and be like, yo, there's a problem with this line or with this content, and they don't receive the feedback, right? Like, and how can you hold someone accountable who's not open to feedback, right? So there's challenges there. Like, I think that, again, the belief systems need to be changed. Consciousness needs to be awakened. They have to do work to be informed, right? To be educated, to be open to receive. Another thing that came up recently, a really notable network came to Hugh, which I thought was interesting, and I hadn't seen anything like this as of lately, but they came to us and they wanted to, were in talks to create sort of like this development contract where everything that they have creative on the table that is going to go into development, where we'll work together to see, like, does it speak to the culture? Is this stuff on track? Do we need to make some tweaks? So coming to us is like a temp check, which, I mean, there's so many creative, and I don't think there's one standard way to do it, but that I hadn't seen anything like that as of late. So there's so many different ways I think that that it can be done, and we're all creatives. You don't need to be a writer or a director to be a creative. All the producers are creative. We creatively problem solve. We creatively, put fires out and, do things like that. So I think that we have to tap into our creativity to see how we can work this thing out.
I'm getting a lot of, I think people want to ask a few questions. So I'd like to open it up to our audience and see if anyone has a question they'd like to ask our audience, our panelists, excuse me. Anyone else? Let's see. Let me just go through this and see. Where are them questions? No, they said they had questions. Okay, Marissa, ask your question, please. Type it out, please. Jade, please type your question out, please. Okay, so Marissa Forrest wanted to know, what about portraying POC negatively? Let me see if she can elaborate that a little bit more. Okay, someone else wanted to know, what are some organizations we should know as POC in film and television industry? I know Shirley, she highlighted Who You Know, but does anyone else know of any other organizations that might be very helpful to POC creators?
Hollywood Here is an organization that's been getting been running some programs. It's just Hollywood, HERE. It's a hashtag on Twitter. And they were doing sort of like speed dating with like executive producers and upper level writers and incoming writer directors. I participated in that, and it was really great. And I think it was a really great place for people to sort of reach out, especially in this weird time where we aren't able to like go to mixers and things. It was the closest thing to going to a mixer. And so they were on Twitter. I would recommend looking them up.
I actually wrote an article highlighting a bunch of BIPOC organizations. So if you just search like Shirley Williams Refinery29, it should take you to like my landing page
Awesome.
there, and there's an article there. But there's Brown Girls Doc Mafia, there's Black TV Film Collective, there's Black Public Media, there's Who You Know, there's Black House. There's so many, but that page, that article will give you a bunch of resources.
So someone would like to know, what's the best piece of advice you would give to writers seeking to be assistants in the writer room, simply seeking to learn more? So do you have any practical advice for people, up and coming writers?
Oh, that
take it,
Amy.
I'm like, you want to take it, Dayna?
Well, and let me make sure, is it for getting that position or when you're in that position?
I guess he said to be an assistant in the writer's room.
Oh man, there is no easy way. I would say it is, first of all, I would say this, it's the right question to ask, in the sense of, I came up as a writer's assistant, Amy came up as a writer's assistant. It's a great position to be able to really, it's like its own intensive form of graduate school. And so I do recommend it. I think the thing to keep in mind is, often by the time you're thinking about it for a show you've heard of, it's probably too late. So being aware that the earlier that you can be getting in touch with people who might like have relationships with a show. So like if a new pilot is being developed or picked up and that kind of thing, it's the earliest possible time that you can reach out for those kind of jobs. So by the time you're hearing about a show, that they've had a writer's assistant for a while. So I think being aware of that is one. And even some of the programs, a lot of the studios and networks have writing programs. sometimes reaching out to the people who had those programs, they can also make referrals and get information about writer's assistant positions. They are really, really hard to come by is the bottom line, because often the writers who are on those shows are going to have relationships. So they are tough. I think it's the same kind of persistence that you want to apply to anything you're going after in the business, but it is the right, it is a position I highly recommend. Amy, you got anything?
Sure. Yeah, I also think these organizations, the first question, getting involved with organizations, because it's all about network, not networking, but who is in your network. All my best opportunities have come from people at my level, because we're all moving up together. We hear about stuff at the same time. It's like, oh, I already got a job. You want it? It's like that kind of thing where you're sharing the wealth with people you know. And I think sometimes there's this like misconception that if I network up, someone at the top of the ladder will run down a rope, but they're already like, all their ropes are in other people's hands. So it's like, it's hard to reach to like, Chuck Lorre, do you got a job for me? He has 19 other people ahead of you if he just met you. But the person who's going to have a job for you is the person that you met on one of Shirley's pages. It's like, that's how you actually meet people. I think the other thing is to come in through other ways. Like you being a writer's assistant is kind of like being a secretary a little bit. You're typing all the time, writing what people are saying in the room, and sometimes you get to pitch. It's the closest you can be to the writers, but doing online typing tests to get your typing speed up, PAing on films, doing jobs that show you have no ego, like, because a lot of it is like no ego kind of work, and having a resume that reflects that you are actually invested in this path. And then also writing, because the other thing is people sometimes become writer's assistants and then get stuck in that job because they don't have any samples or scripts or anything to show for themselves. So my recommendation is to write a lot and get your writers group strong and get your samples great, and then start looking for these types of jobs, because once you have them, you don't have the time to write anymore. It's so mentally exhausting in a way I cannot explain to be a writer's assistant, because you're just like all day long, like, and just like listening and like trying to get all the jokes down, and then by 6 p.m. you're just like shot. And then
you're working with writers a lot of times as well.
Yes, exactly. And then here comes some EP going like, hey, I'd love to read what you got, and you have no scripts because you're like, I'm too busy working for you. So if you already have that Dropbox ready, you can just be like, it's in your inbox now, and then you just get back, so it's like having the network of support, because the job is fun, but it's hard, and having that network of people at your level. And if you don't have those people already, it literally is by scouring these groups that are online and free and available, like Facebook, Twitter, they're all on there. And I'm sure they're on Shirley's website, and you can find them and just get involved and start meeting people. This is such a weird time that you can also be like, hey, want to get on an informal 6-person Zoom? It's free for 40 minutes. Let's all get on, and just like meet some people.
Starting a virtual writers group, like this would be a great time to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Someone wanted to know, how do you guys all self-care to reset from all the work and the world? And Oge, you mentioned when you you mentioned when you were doing research for the documentary, it wore you out. So how did you take care of yourself? How was self-care?
I love that you said that.
Well, the first thing was that I had to get back into therapy. I think mental health is our most powerful currency, and I know we don't talk enough about it. But for me, therapy was really, really resourceful and therapeutic. And then the other thing for me is I do a lot of breath work and meditation. Like before I got into this realm of storytelling, I used to teach restorative yoga and breath work and meditation. So I utilize those tools to help me stay grounded and to help me stay balanced. And then community, right? Like keeping myself grounded and supported by people who understand my experience and my stories as well. And then just giving myself permission to feel all the feels. Like I think, especially as Black women, we're taught to shrink ourselves. And for me, it was really giving myself the grace and the permission to be fully human and to experience the full spectrum of emotions. So yeah, that's what I did.
Thank you.
I want a second, third, fourth, and fifth therapy. Therapy is literally the GOAT. Like therapy is necessary as an artist. It's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because you need to get more in tune with who you are, because it helps you create better art. So I just think it's so important. This journey is so weird. It's not like being a doctor, you put in this many years and boom, you're a surgeon. It's like you come into your artistic power when you do, like there's no clock. And that sort of inertia of not knowing when you're a butterfly can be really hard. And so I think, yeah, finding those tools of self-care, especially therapy, go, you know, I'm going to shout out Talkspace because they always talk about it on the Read, offer code the Read. It's my favorite podcast, and they have a commercial every week.
They do.
Talkspace, offer code the Read. It should be accessible to all. Artists should honestly get it for free. Black women should get it for free. But yeah, if you can get into a therapy practice.
Yeah.
And just to co-sign, also get into, I love, like we've heard now, meditation, breath work, therapy, like expanding, I think, in terms of this mental health conversation that we're still just beginning in our community. There are a lot of different ways that you can implore, you know, that you can engage with self-care, that you can engage with your mental health, you know, whether it's like healers, or there was a point when I remember being like, am I going to sound weird if I say I've got a healer and a business coach and a therapist? It's like whatever resource is working to keep you upright, you know?
Yeah.
So exploring, not, you know, exploring, what do you engage with? Do you engage with breath work? Does therapy, does meditation also speak to you? So also this is a great time to explore that stuff as well.
Someone wanted to know, Lynn, is it important for the characters to align with the writer's origin?
I think it certainly helps, but for the most part, I don't know who the writers are. I don't know what anything about them. And that, to me, as a performer, gives me the power to feel like I have an agency to make it my own. You know, I think that you'll find that actors who
Did she freeze?
Yeah.
The most are the actors who nobody else can see it. Did I freeze?
Just
Did I just?
You're back.
I don't know what you heard, but basically, I feel like it's important for people to feel like they can be themselves and bring that to the work. I mean, very rarely are you going to interact with a writer unless they're like the writer director of something. Very rarely are you going to ask the writer what they really thought of when they wrote a scene. So just making that decision on your own is such an important part of being an actor, so that, you know, when they hire you, they're hiring you because you were able to take that and make it your own.
Amy, someone wanted to know where they can watch your short film, Honeymoon.
Great question.
That's awesome. Well, it's next screening at the Austin Film Festival and also at Imagine This Women's Film Festival, both in Texas, which is where I'm from. And it makes me so happy to be at two festivals in my
Wait, where in Texas are you from?
Dallas.
I'm from Houston.
Oh shit. Okay, cool. Yes. So I'm so honored to be screening at the Imagine This Film Festival. So, you know, buy your tickets. I'm sure it's in the link somewhere.
And it's amazing. I highly recommend you partake in that film. It's beautiful.
It's beautifully made. Yes, definitely. Let's see. Oh, someone wanted to know, and this is open to anyone. What is one question you hope that you're asked that you're never asked?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Don't know. It's a stumper.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah, all right.
I mean, I love talking about food. So I'm always hoping someone will ask me what I just ate, or like a great restaurant, because then I'll just talk. But I feel like people do ask me those questions all the time. That somebody's going to ask me like a very mundane question, like crunchy peanut butter or smooth, and why? And I'm like, I'll just go off.
Crunchy.
Yes, exactly. Obviously.
Unsalted, and I add my own salt. Just.
Oh, I love it.
That's so old school. That's like you keep
I
butter
will be
in
in control of how salty it is.
All right. I think the last question we have from the audience is, Dayna, where can we find your online class?
It's called Right Away, and it's on the Teachable platform. So it's Right Away with Dayna Lynne North. And the first course is up, and then there will occasionally be some live, there'll be a part 2, which will involve like some live interactive stuff. So there will be more courses coming, but the first one is up on Teachable.
All right. Lastly, do you have anything we should be looking out for? Anything that we should, be on the lookout for? Anybody?
Is this to everyone?
To everyone.
Okay.
I mean, I would love it if people would watch my movie. It's out on demand right now. It's on Amazon Prime. It's at the library if you want to order from Hoopla. It's called I Will Make You Mine. That is my plug, and I'm done.
All right. Anyone else?
I'm in development for a full-length documentary. You can go to my website and read more about it, shirleyvernay.com, and there's a page there that'll give you some info on it.
You can watch Invisible Portraits on Vimeo right now, but soon to be, there will be an announcement. We just signed with a distribution partner that I'm really, really excited about. And then just did a voting PSA with Levi's. And then also in the works of a new docuseries that I'm about to explore, as well as a fellowship with UCLA. So really excited about that.
Exciting. Awesome. Amy, anything?
I'll just plug Honeymoon again. Screening soon at Imagine This Women's Film Festival. Don't forget. And yeah, and I went to UCLA for grad school, so it's really awesome. I love it there. I'm glad that you're going to be learning from there. And since you mentioned a voting PSA, I would also love to plug voting.
Yes.
Please vote.
Please vote.
Please vote.
Vote like our lives and our democracy.
Because they do.
Yeah. Dayna, do you have anything?
That I can share at the moment. I'm excited to be working with Matthew Cherry on the Young Love adaptation, but the Young Love is the series, the adaptation of Hair Love, the short. We're having a great time launching that, and that's it for now. Stay tuned.
Okay. Quickly, where can our audience follow you on social media? Like plug in your social media so they can keep up with your updates.
Yep, I'm everywhere. Shirley Vernay.
Amy?
At Dayna North. Sorry, at Dayna North on Instagram and Classic Dayna on Twitter.
I'm at Aniobi, which is J-A-N as in Nancy, I-O-B as in boy, I, on everything.
On everything. Lynn?
Everything.
I'm Ms. Lynn Chen, MSLYNNCHEN, everywhere.
Everywhere. And Oge?
I'm Oge the Yogi on all social media channels. So just my first name, Oge, O-G-E, on all social media channels.
I want to thank you guys so much for participating for our first panel of the festival. And I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk to us and just, allow us to prick your brain and allow to take answers from the audience. I thank you so much. Our 5th annual film festival is running from today to August 4th. You can head to our website at imaginethisprods.com. We have tons of free events, workshops on how to get your film into film festivals. And we have an opening night party tonight with DJ She Rock. It's free. Come through, come hang out, watch some great films by some amazing women filmmakers and storytellers. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrice.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, y'all. Nice
Bye.
meeting you.
Take care. Stay safe.